Priscilla McAllister always thought that her life was like a perfectly matched interior. Every detail was in its place, the colors were in harmony, and the overall composition was pleasing to the eye. She stood at the panoramic window of her living room, absent-mindedly stirring the long-cooled green tea with jasmine. The morning sun goldened her wheat hair, gathered in a careless bun, and on the ring finger of her right hand gleamed her engagement ring, a dainty platinum band with a scattering of small diamonds. "Honey, have you seen my blue tie? The one with the diagonal stripes?" Wade's voice came from somewhere in the bedroom. Priscilla mechanically replied, "In the right dresser drawer where it always is," and continued to look at her immaculate garden. Everything was as it should be. Trimmed bushes, smooth paths, flower beds. Perfect. Maybe even too perfect. In her 32, she had achieved what many women dream of: a successful husband, a house in a prestigious neighborhood, a job as a decorator that brings not so much money as pleasure. But sometimes, especially on those quiet mornings, she had a strange feeling, as if she were living in a skillfully created set. The ringing of the doorbell broke the morning silence. On the threshold stood a courier with a registered letter. "Mrs. McAllister?" Priscilla nodded, signing for the receipt. The envelope was thick, with ornate handwriting and the stamp of the law office of Bradbury and Associates. "What is it?" Wade appeared in the hallway, already fully dressed for the office, tightening that same blue tie. His blonde hair was perfectly styled and his blue eyes read the usual impatience of a man late for an important meeting. "I don't know." Priscilla opened the envelope slowly, feeling her fingers twitch slightly. The letter was from the executor of her godmother's executor, Eleanor Hightower. Eleanor. The memory came suddenly. A tall, stately woman with a mop of silver hair, always smelling of French perfume and wearing pearls. She was Priscilla's mother's best friend, and the only person who really understood the little dreamy girl who dreamed of art and beauty. When her parents were killed in an automobile accident, it was Eleanor who supported 14-year-old Priscilla, paid for her private school tuition and then art college. "Dear Priscilla," the letter began, "if you are reading these lines, it means I am no longer alive. Do not be sad. I have lived a long and happy life. As you know, I have never had children of my own, but you have always been like my own daughter." Priscilla sank down on the banquette by the mirror, feeling a lump come up to her throat. She hadn't seen her godmother for the past 2 years. First the pandemic, then Eleanor's move to Florida, where she had bought a small villa. "I leave you all my assets, including my Florida home, bank accounts, and my collection of antiques. The total inheritance is $4,800,000. "How much?" Wade's voice sounded so harsh that Priscilla flinched. She hadn't even noticed him peering over her shoulder. "Almost $5 million," she whispered, still not believing what was written. Wade whistled, his face changing, taking on a predatory expression that Priscilla had never noticed before. "This is awesome! Now we'll be able to buy that house in Brooklyn Heights I was talking about, and a new car. My BMW is getting old. Oh, and of course, I can finally open my consulting firm." Priscilla was silent as she thought back to their acquaintance 6 years ago. Back then, she was just starting her career as a decorator, and Wade was working as a manager for a large company. He'd seemed so reliable, confident, knowing what he wanted out of life. She fell in love with his ambitiousness, the way he planned for the future. Their wedding was modest. They were saving for a down payment on a house. Priscilla thought then that it was the beginning of a great love. Now, looking at her husband planning to spend her inheritance, she wondered for the first time, was it love? "Darling, I need time to think things through," she said quietly. "Eleanor was like a mother to me." Sure, Wade dismissed absent-mindedly, already immersed in his own thoughts. "We'll discuss it in detail tonight. I have a client meeting. I'll call you later." He pecked her cheek, hastily, out of habit, and disappeared out the door. Priscilla was alone, still holding the letter. Outside the window, the leaves of the maple tree she and Wade had planted in their first year of marriage rustled. Back then, she'd believed the tree would grow with their love. Now, looking at its spreading crown, she thought for the first time that maybe everything in her perfectly planned life wasn't so perfect. She went upstairs to her study, the only place in the house that was a creative mess. Fabric swatches, interior sketches, and art albums lay everywhere. On the wall hung the first work she was truly proud of, a restoration project for an ancient library. It had been Eleanor who had helped her get the job by introducing her to the right people. Priscilla sank into her favorite armchair upholstered in vintage velvet and closed her eyes. Before her inner gaze flashed images of the past. Here she was, a little girl sitting in Eleanor's living room, mesmerized by antique furniture and paintings. Here Godmother teaches her to understand the porcelain and distinguish between eras by the style of furniture. Here they are together choosing fabrics for her first serious project. Her phone vibrated with a message from Wade. "Called the realtor about that house. We'll sign the papers with the lawyer tonight to redistribute the inheritance so I can start negotiating the purchase." Priscilla reread the message several times. Something in his tone, in that self-assured disposition of other people's money, scratched her soul. She remembered Eleanor's words, spoken shortly before the wedding. "Honey, sometimes what seems like a safe harbor can be a trap. Don't let anyone make decisions for you." At the time, she'd brushed those words off as an act of overprotection. Now they sounded like prophecy. The whole day passed like a blur. Priscilla canceled a meeting with a client, unable to concentrate on choosing colors for the colonial-style living room. She wandered aimlessly through the house, stopping at every item, every interior detail she had once so carefully selected. All these objects suddenly seemed alien to her, as if they were sets for a play that was coming to an end. Wade returned earlier than usual, energetic and excited. He smelled of expensive whiskey, clearly celebrating a future deal with his co-workers. "Darling, I've arranged everything." From the threshold he began, carelessly throwing his briefcase on the antique console. "We're meeting my lawyer tomorrow at 10 o'clock. He's already prepared all the documents for the transfer of the rights to administer the estate." Priscilla, sitting in her favorite chair by the fireplace, slowly looked up. "What documents, Wade? What are you talking about?" "Well, what about what?" He loosened his tie and plopped down on the couch. "About your godmother's inheritance, of course. I've arranged to buy that house in Brooklyn Heights, need a deposit within the week, and I've also got my eye on a great office space in the business center." "Wait," Priscilla straightened in her chair. "Have you already planned how you're going to spend the money I got, without even discussing it with me?" Wade grumbled. "Drop the nonsense, honey. We're family. What difference does it make who exactly got the inheritance? Everything is ours in common." "No, not everything," Priscilla said quietly but firmly. "This money was left to me by Eleanor. Not to us, to me." Wade's face changed, taking on a hard expression. "Don't you trust me? I'm a financier with 15 years of experience, by the way. I know better how to handle that kind of money." "It's not a matter of trust," Priscilla felt her voice shake. "It's just that I want to decide for myself how to handle the inheritance." "By yourself?" He laughed, but there was no mirth in the laugh. "What do you understand about investments, in money management? You're a decorator, Priscilla. Your job is to pick curtains and arrange pillows." Those words hit harder than a slap in the face. Priscilla remembered how 3 years ago she'd turned down a major project remodeling a historic mansion because Wade had insisted she needed to spend more time at home. "Why do you need all this fuss?" he said at the time. "I make enough money." "Maybe if you hadn't made me give up that project," she began. "There you go again," Wade interrupted. "I've always taken care of you, made sure you had a comfortable life. And now that there's an opportunity to take it to the next level, you suddenly decide to show character. He stood up and loomed over her. Look, let's not fight. Just sign the papers tomorrow and I'll take care of everything. I'll buy you a new car, organize renovations to your studio, anything you want. And if I don't sign? Priscilla asked quietly. Wade froze, his eyes narrowing. What do you mean you won't sign? That's what it means. It's my inheritance and I want to manage it myself. You don't know what you're doing. His voice became menacingly calm. You can't do it without me. Who's been paying all the bills these past years? Who's been providing you with a trouble-free life while you've been playing at your design? Priscilla suddenly remembered their first serious spat. It had happened a year after their marriage. She'd gotten an offer to work on a project in Boston 3 months, a good fee, a chance to make a name for herself. Wade rolled scandal. My wife will not live in another city. What will people think? She relented as she did many times afterward. I vividly remember how you treated my job all those years ago, she stood up, feeling anger growing inside. How you mocked my ambition, how you called my profession a cute hobby. But you know what? Eleanor believed in me. She saw me not just as the wife of a successful husband, but as a person. Eleanor was an old maid with lots of money and strange ideas, Wade exploded. And enough of that. We're going to see a lawyer tomorrow and you're going to sign the papers. I'm not going to let you ruin our future over some silly principles. Our future? Priscilla grinned bitterly. Or yours. You haven't even asked me what I want. What do you want? He grabbed her by the shoulders. To keep fiddling with these interiors no one wants. To sit in your studio for days, poring over fabric swatches. Wake up, Priscilla. I'm offering you a real life. She gingerly released herself from his grip. No, Wade. You're offering me your life, and I want to live mine. He pulled back, his face contorted. So that's it? You're choosing money over a husband? I'm choosing me, she answered quietly, for the first time in 6 years. You'll regret it, he gritted through his teeth. You think you can do it alone? Without me, you're nothing. Priscilla stared silently at the man in front of her, so familiar and yet so foreign. Where was the caring, confident man she had fallen in love with? Or had he never existed? She left the living room, went up to the bedroom, and locked the door. Something rattled downstairs. It sounded like Wade had thrown a glass. Priscilla sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the dressing table mirror. Strangely, she felt no fear, only fatigue and relief. For the first time in years, she saw the truth, saw how she had gradually lost herself in this marriage, how she had allowed her dreams to be extinguished, how she had accepted being a shadow of her successful husband. Eleanor hadn't just left her money, she'd given her a chance at freedom, and Priscilla knew for sure that she would not miss this chance. The morning was chilly. Priscilla awoke to the sound of rain drumming on the eaves. She didn't immediately realize why she was lying on top of the blanket, fully clothed, as the events of last night came flooding back to her. Wade had left the house after the fight, slamming the door loudly, and she hadn't had the energy to change and lie down properly. Her phone showed 7 missed calls from her husband and 1 message. Meet you at 10 at the lawyer's office. I'll text you the address later. Don't do anything stupid. Priscilla walked slowly down to the kitchen. Every movement was difficult, as if she were moving underwater. As she poured herself some coffee, she noticed her favorite porcelain figurine on the table, Eleanor's 25th birthday present. A little ballerina with her leg raised in arabesque, a symbol of grace and freedom. You look just like her, my godmother said then. Just as fragile on the outside, but with a steel rod inside. At 9:30, the doorbell rang. Wade stood on the doorstep, shaven in an expensive suit, as if last night's scandal had never happened. Get ready, he said in a casual tone. They're expecting us. I'm not going anywhere, Priscilla replied, surprised at the calmness of her own voice. What? He stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. "I'm not signing any papers. This is my inheritance, Wade. My decision." His face darkened. "You leave me no choice. Either we go to a lawyer and resolve this in a civilized manner, or what?" She crossed her arms over her chest. "Either you can pack your things and get out of my house." "Our house," Priscilla corrected. "I put down money for it, too." Wade laughed an unpleasant, carping laugh. "Your measly interest? You've made less in the last year than I spend on gasoline. The house is registered to me, honey. So is the car. So is everything here. Except my inheritance," she added quietly, "which you'll blow in a year with your amateurish approach to money." He raised his voice. "Do you think you can manage alone? Without me, you'll end up on the street. Better on the street than with a man trying to control me." His hand swept to her face. Priscilla instinctively recoiled, but Wade only grabbed her chin. "Last chance. You're coming with me or you're packing." She silently released herself from his grip and headed for the stairs. "You've got an hour!" he shouted after her. In the bedroom, Priscilla mechanically pulled out her suitcase, folding clothes, documents, the essentials. Her hands trembled, but her mind was remarkably clear. She was coming down the stairs with 2 suitcases when she heard the sound of breaking glass. Wade had thrown a picture of their wedding against the wall. "You're going to regret that," he hissed, "when you end up in a cheap rented apartment when you realize no one wants your bohemian bullshit." "Goodbye, Wade." She headed for the door, feeling his hateful stare with her back. "Stop right there!" He blocked her way. "Car keys." Priscilla silently pulled the keychain out of her purse and placed it on the table by the door. After all, it really was his car. The rain intensified as she stepped outside. Her suitcases were dragging her arms away, and the nearest hotel was at least a mile away. Taking out her cell phone, she hailed a cab. The driver, an elderly Indian man with kind eyes, helped her load her bags and kept quiet the whole way, for which she was grateful. The Blue Haven Hotel was not luxurious, but it was clean and cozy. Priscilla took a room for a week, using almost all the cash in her purse. While the desk clerk was doing the paperwork, she noticed her reflection in the lobby mirror, a pale woman with disheveled hair and a rumpled dress. Could it really be her? The room was cool and smelled of lavender freshener. Priscilla sat on the edge of the bed without undressing, and for the first time that day she let herself cry. The tears flowed silently. She mourned not so much for her broken marriage as for the 6 years of her life wasted on an illusion. Her phone was ringing off the hook with calls and messages. Wade went from threats to pleas and back again. She turned off the sound and walked to the window. Down below, people with umbrellas were rushing about, cars honking, an unfamiliar street living its life. Somewhere out there, in this huge city, she was going to start all over again. Priscilla took her laptop out of her suitcase and opened her email. The first thing she did was to write to Eleanor's lawyer. She needed to get all the inheritance documents done right away. Then she checked her bank account. She had enough money for a month and a half of modest living if she saved. Toward evening, a message came from Wade. "I changed the locks. You can pick up the rest of your stuff tomorrow between 12 and 2. Don't even try to go near the house after that." She smiled, bitterly, but without regret, pulled a small ballerina from her purse, which had miraculously survived the bustle of packing, and set it on the bedside table. "You were right, Eleanor," Priscilla whispered. "I do have a steel rod. It's just that I'd forgotten about it." It was gradually getting darker outside the window. She ordered a sandwich and tea for her room, not feeling hungry but realizing she needed to eat. For the first time in years, she was going to have to make all the decisions on her own. The thought was both frightening and strangely uplifting. Before going to bed, Priscilla stood under the hot shower for a long time, as if trying to wash away the endless day. Tomorrow she would have to start a new life, look for an apartment, sort out the paperwork, plan for the future. But now, in the silence of the hotel room, she allowed herself to just be. A woman who had found the strength to say no. A woman who chose freedom. During her week at the Blue Haven Hotel, Priscilla had grown accustomed to the morning noise of the street and the smell of fresh baked goods from the cafe across the street. She spent long hours on her laptop, browsing apartment listings and trying to find something suitable within a reasonable budget. Housing prices in the city made her shudder. On Wednesday, she picked up the rest of her belongings from the house. Wade had gone away on purpose, leaving his friend Thomas, a lanky manager in his department who always looked at Priscilla with ill-concealed disdain, to oversee the process. As the movers took out the boxes of her books, albums, and work materials, she took one last walk through the rooms, saying goodbye to a life that now seemed alien. "Mrs. McAllister," Thomas called out to her as she was getting into a cab. "Wade wanted me to tell you he's filing for divorce. The papers will arrive the other day." She nodded, feeling nothing but tired. All the boxes had to be taken to a small storage unit. The hotel just didn't have room for them. That evening of the same day, an unexpected phone call came. "Priscilla, it's Raven Thornton. I can't believe I found your number." The voice of an old friend she hadn't heard from in over 3 years made her heart flutter. They'd met back in college. Raven had studied architecture and Priscilla interior design. Then there were joint projects, long conversations past midnight, plans to open their own studio. Until Wade started hinting that this friendship was not in keeping with his wife's status. "Raven." Priscilla struggled to hold back tears. "How did you find me?" "Saw your name on a list of attendees at a modern design conference. Thought I'd take a chance and give you a call. They say you left that pompous turkey?" "News travels fast," Priscilla grinned bitterly. "Listen," Raven's voice took on a familiar, determined note. "I'm in town right now. Why don't we meet up, right now, at our old cafe on 7th? An hour later, they were already sitting in a cozy corner of the Copper Kettle, a small coffee shop where they had once thought up their most daring projects. Raven hadn't changed much. The same fiery red hair in an elegant bob, bright green eyes, and a scattering of freckles on her nose. Only wrinkles in the corners of her eyes appeared, and there was a rare flicker of gray in her hair. An inheritance, then. Raven sipped her cappuccino, and this asshole decided to get his hands on it. "He's always been controlling." Priscilla crumbled a blueberry muffin. "I just didn't want to notice it." "Well, now you have." Her friend covered her hand with her own. "And you know what? I'm proud of you. Not many people find the strength to start over." "If only I knew where to live," Priscilla sighed. "All the decent options cost a fortune." Raven smiled enigmatically. "What if I told you I had a solution? Remember that old loft we had our eye on for a studio? I bought it. The second floor is empty. It'll make a great apartment. It just needs some renovations." "Are you kidding?" Priscilla straightened up. "That loft on Broome Street?" "That's the one. The neighborhood's certainly not as flashy as your ex, but it's got character. And you know what?" Raven pitched forward. "Let's rebuild our dream. We open a studio together. You do interiors. I'll do architecture. You have the startup capital now. I have the space and the client base. What do you say?" Priscilla looked at her friend, feeling a long-forgotten warmth spill inside. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to actually dream. "The loft needs some serious remodeling," she said thoughtfully, "but it's got amazing windows and a great layout." "So it's decided then?" Raven brightened. "We'll start the paperwork tomorrow." They sat in the cafe until closing time, sketching renovation plans on napkins, reminiscing about old projects and sharing new ideas. Back at the hotel, Priscilla felt like a different person. It was as if the veil had fallen from her eyes and the world was bright again. The next days flew by in a whirlwind of events: inheritance paperwork, meetings with contractors, planning the renovation of the loft. Raven was right. The neighborhood wasn't the most prestigious, but it had its charm. Old industrial buildings neighbored with trendy galleries, and artists and musicians gathered in small cafes. In the evenings, Priscilla worked on the design of her new apartment. The high ceilings, huge windows, and open floor plan gave her a lot of room for creativity. She decided to keep the industrial character of the space while adding warm accents and cozy nooks. "You know what the funny thing is?" she once told Raven. "Wade always kept saying I couldn't do it without him, and now, for the first time, I feel like I'm actually living." "Because you're finally being you," her friend smiled. "The Priscilla I knew in college, talented, brave, willing to take risks for your dreams." On Friday, the divorce papers arrived. Priscilla ran her eyes over them, noting that Wade had no claim to the inheritance. Apparently, his lawyers had explained the futility of the idea. She signed the papers without regret, feeling the last thread tying her to the past tear away. That evening, she and Raven sat on the floor of the future apartment, sipping wine from plastic cups and watching the sunset through the huge windows. "Here's to new beginnings," Raven raised her glass. "Here's to coming back to ourselves," Priscilla echoed, watching the last rays of sunlight paint the brick walls a warm golden color. There was a lot of work ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she knew exactly where she was going. The office of the law firm Bradbury and Associates smelled of leather and expensive coffee. Priscilla sat across from Lawrence Bradbury, a gray-haired man with shrewd brown eyes who had handled Eleanor's cases for many years. "Now, Miss McAllister," he spread the papers before him, "let's look at the structure of the inheritance in detail. In addition to the villa in Florida, valued at $1,600,000, you will inherit an investment portfolio worth $2,200,000, a collection of antiques valued at $800,000, and cash in accounts of about $200,000. Priscilla took a sip of water, trying to cope with the dizziness of the sums voiced. "And what is included in the investment portfolio?" "Your godmother was a very forward-thinking woman." Bradbury pulled out his glasses. 30% invested in safe blue chips, 25% in government bonds, the rest spread between index funds and a small stake in promising technology startups. "I don't know much about investing at all," Priscilla admitted. "Eleanor saw that coming," the lawyer smiled softly. "She'd left a letter recommending that she contact financial advisor Michael Everett. He's been managing her portfolio for years." They spent the next few hours discussing the details of the inheritance. Priscilla learned about the taxes to be paid, the condition of the villa in Florida, the intricacies of asset management. Her head was spinning with new information. "One last thing," Bradbury pulled out an envelope. "A personal letter from Eleanor. She asked me to give it to her after we'd discussed the formalities." That evening, sitting in the unfinished apartment, Priscilla finally opened the envelope. "Dear Priscilla, if you are reading this letter, it means that I have already left and you have received my inheritance. Knowing you, I can guess that you are feeling a little lost right now in the face of such a responsibility. Don't be afraid. I've always seen you not only as a talented designer but also as a strong woman with great business sense. You just didn't believe it yourself, or someone made you not believe it. I'm not just leaving you money, I'm giving you freedom of choice. Use it wisely. Don't let anyone tell you what to do with your inheritance. Trust your instincts. There's an 18th century secretaire in the antiques collection. In the bottom drawer, you'll find my personal diary with notes on each item in the collection and the stories behind their acquisition. I think it will help you better understand the value of each piece. Love, Eleanor." The next day, Priscilla met with Michael Everett, a trim, middle-aged man with an attentive gaze. He patiently explained the principles of investing, helped her understand the portfolio structure, and offered options for optimizing it. "Given your plans to open a design studio," he said, making notes, "it makes sense to reallocate some of the funds. You could free up about $500,000 without significantly affecting the portfolio's overall return." That evening, he and Raven sat down to work on the business plan. Her friend brought her financial statements for the past few years, showed her cost and income structure, and shared her experience with her clients. "Look," Raven drew a diagram on a large sheet of paper. "The first floor is perfect for a showroom and offices. You can set up 3 work areas, a meeting room, and an exhibition space. And here," she pointed to a corner of the drawing, "we'll make a small coffee shop for customers." Priscilla nodded, making notes and calculating costs. Renovations, equipment, furniture, salaries for future employees. Marketing, the numbers added up to a sizable sum, but now she felt more confident in financial matters. Over the weekend, they traveled to Florida to see the villa. The house was beautifully preserved. Eleanor had kept it in perfect condition. Priscilla decided not to sell it yet, but to rent it out. It provided an additional stable income. It took 2 weeks to work on the business plan. They calculated every detail, made a marketing strategy, thought over the positioning of the future studio. Raven insisted on hiring a professional accountant and lawyer. "You know what the most amazing thing is?" Priscilla once said while going over another financial report. "I used to be terrified of it all. The numbers, the contracts, the investments. Now I'm even beginning to find a certain beauty in it." "Because it's a kind of design, too," Raven smiled. "Only instead of colors and textures, you're working with numbers and graphs." By the end of the month, the basic documents were ready. Priscilla allocated $500,000 for business development, with another $200,000 set aside for personal expenses and emergencies. The rest of the funds remained under Michael Everett's management. "You should have seen the look on Wade's face when he found out I was starting my own business," Priscilla laughed as she closed the last folder of paperwork. "His friend Thomas just happened to blurt it out in a meeting at the bank." "I can imagine," Raven hummed. "I bet he was sure you'd be begging him to come back." "Do you know?" Priscilla looked out the window where the sun was setting. "I'm actually grateful to him. If it hadn't been for his greed and control, I never would have found the strength to start over." The Thornton and McAllister studio was scheduled to open in mid-October. The week before, Priscilla practically lived in the future studio, controlling every detail of the finishing. The space turned out exactly as they had envisioned: high ceilings with exposed beams, brick walls, and huge windows. The design combined an industrial aesthetic with cozy details like vintage chairs, live plants, and designer lighting fixtures. "I can't believe we did this," Raven pronounced, standing in the middle of the showroom the evening before the opening. They had just finished arranging the last pieces of furniture and were now admiring the result. The morning of opening day began with an unexpected phone call. Wade's name popped up on the phone screen. "I hear you're opening some kind of studio." His voice oozed condescension. "Look, why don't you stop before it's too late? I'm ready to forget your inheritance stunt. You come home, and everything will be as it was before." "Thanks. But no thanks," Priscilla replied calmly. "I have an opening tonight, so—" "You'll be burned out in a month," he interrupted. "You think anyone's going to take your little game of business seriously?" She silently ended the call and went back to her final preparations. By 6 p.m., the studio space was filled with guests: architects, designers, representatives from construction companies. Many were old clients of Raven's. Priscilla spotted several prominent realtors specializing in high-end real estate. "Priscilla," a familiar voice called out to her. "Amazing space." She turned around and saw Beatrice Woodward, editor-in-chief of Modern Interiors magazine. They had met at a conference a few years ago. "Beatrice, I didn't know you were coming." "Couldn't miss such an event," the latter smiled. "By the way, meet Jeffrey Huntington." He's just looking for a designer for his new project. Priscilla spent the next hour discussing with Jeffrey, a successful real estate developer, the design concept for a luxury apartment complex. By the end of the conversation, she had her first major contract in hand. The evening was well underway when she spotted Thomas, a friend of Wade's, in the doorway. He was defiantly taking pictures of the premises on his phone. "Is there a problem?" Raven asked quietly as she approached. "I can have security escort him out." "No need," Priscilla shook her head. "Let her watch and report back." The next day, the workday began. The first client was Olivia Montgomery, a socialite who had decided to renovate her penthouse. She was known for her difficult character. 3 previous designers had refused to work with her. "You see," Olivia said, meticulously inspecting fabric samples, "I need something special, something my friends don't have." Priscilla spent several hours with her, listening intently, taking notes and suggesting unconventional solutions. By the end of the meeting, Olivia looked impressed. "You're the first designer who really understood me," she declared as she signed the contract. A week after the opening, Wade made another attempt to intervene. He sent a letter from his lawyer demanding to renegotiate the terms of the divorce, citing some non-existent arrangements. Priscilla simply handed the letter to her lawyer. Olivia's penthouse project proved to be challenging but exciting. Priscilla spent several hours a day on site, supervising every detail. When the work was finished, Olivia threw a huge party. "It's absolutely marvelous," raved the guests as they looked at the interior. "Who is your designer?" By the end of the evening, Priscilla had 3 more new clients from the city's high society. "You know what the best part is?" she was telling Raven late that night as they were closing up the studio. "I used to work for a portfolio, and now I feel like I'm actually helping people create their perfect space." "And making good money at it," her friend winked. The studio was quickly gaining a reputation. Beatrice's article in Modern Interiors caught the attention of the professional community. Jeffrey Huntington's residential project was progressing well. The developer was already talking about a long-term partnership. 2 months after the opening, Priscilla happened to meet Thomas at a coffee shop. "Wade was right about you," he hissed. "You've changed. You've become rigid, calculating." "No, Thomas," she replied calmly, picking up her latte. "I've just stopped pretending to be weak." That evening, she received a letter from a realtor, someone interested in buying her and Wade's former home. Priscilla smiled and forwarded the letter to her ex-husband. It was the final touch to her past life. The lights were already on in the studio. Raven was working on a new project. Fresh magazines with publications of their work lay on the table, client meetings lined up on the calendar, and new orders waited in the mail. "Home?" Raven asked, not taking her eyes off the blueprints. "Home," Priscilla nodded. "I have an important meeting with representatives of a boutique hotel chain tomorrow." Turning off the light in her office, she caught her reflection in the window. The confident woman in the elegant suit bore little resemblance to the confused Priscilla who had walked out of the Blue Haven Hotel with 2 suitcases a few months ago. She was herself at last. The trouble began on Monday. Priscilla was going through her mail when she discovered a letter from Jeffrey Huntington about canceling her contract. The wording was vague, due to emerging doubts about the performer's professional reputation. "Is something wrong?" Raven noticed her friend frown as she stared into the monitor. "Huntington is terminating the contract. No explanation." By late afternoon, the reason was clear. Rumors had spread through the business community about the financial instability of Thornton and McAllister Studios. Someone had anonymously informed several major clients that the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. "Wade," Priscilla said quietly as she and Raven discussed the situation. "But how? It's not like he has access to our financial information." "He has connections in business circles, though, and a desire for revenge." The next day, Olivia Montgomery called. "Honey, I have to warn you. At the reception yesterday, a certain gentleman was very insistent in asking about you. He was particularly interested in whether you were paying your contractors on time." "And what did you say?" "Said he could kiss my immaculately decorated interior, along with his dirty insinuations," Olivia snorted. Priscilla smiled. Support came from an unexpected direction. Olivia was not just a grateful client, but a powerful ally. However, the problems were multiplying. Several contractors refused to cooperate. The bank suddenly demanded additional guarantees on the credit line. And then an unscheduled tax audit came to the studio. "Someone went to a lot of trouble," their accountant Martin Gray remarked as he looked over the IRS request. "Can we handle it?" Priscilla asked. "Absolutely. Our paperwork is in complete order, but the process will be messy." In the midst of these events, Wade himself appeared. He entered the studio toward the end of the day, impeccably dressed and self-assured as always. "Tough times?" He looked around the room. "You know, it's not too late to fix things. You come home, I'll straighten things out. Get out," Priscilla said calmly. "Think it over carefully. You do realize this is just the beginning, right? I have enough connections to—" "To what?" came a voice from the door. Beatrice Woodward stood there with a dictaphone in her hands. "To organize the harassment of a successful business? To spread false information? That's a criminal offense, isn't it?" Wade went pale. "You have no right to—" "I do, as a journalist and as a member of the city's Chamber of Commerce. By the way, Jeffrey Huntington says hi. He was very interested in the story about how he was tried to be misled." After Wade left, Beatrice turned to Priscilla. "I'm sorry to be unannounced. Olivia called me and told me about the situation." "Thank you," was all Priscilla could utter. "You're welcome. You know, I've been watching your studio for a long time. You're doing an amazing job, and I'm not going to let some petty schemers ruin that." Over the next week, things began to change. Huntington reinstated the contract, apologizing for jumping to conclusions. The tax audit concluded without comment, and Beatrice's article about a new take on urban design brought additional attention to the studio. "You know what the most important thing is?" Raven said when the storm passed. "You didn't even flinch. I would have panicked if I were you, and I finally realized I'm stronger than I thought," Priscilla replied. "You know, Wade always led me to believe that I was helpless without him, that I couldn't handle hardship, and it turns out that it's in hardship that I find my strength." That evening she sat in her study for a long time, going through old sketches. On the table stood that very porcelain ballerina, the symbol of her new life. "You'd be proud of me, Eleanor," Priscilla whispered, looking at the statuette. The phone jingled with a message. Olivia had sent an invitation to a fundraiser. "All the cream of society will be there, and no ex-husbands, I promise," she added with characteristic irony. Priscilla smiled. She'd been through the fire and hadn't burned. Moreover, she had hardened herself, becoming stronger. Now she knew for sure that no matter what happened, she could handle it. And Wade, well, she was almost grateful to him. He'd only helped her find her true strength by trying to break her, and that was the sweetest revenge of all. The Azure Boutique Hotel project had been a turning point for Thornton and McAllister. Priscilla remembered the day she and Raven first walked into the historic downtown building. High ceilings with moldings, marble staircases, huge windows. Everything breathed history. "We want to keep the historic feel but add modern comforts," explained the owner of the hotel chain, Edward Blackstone. "Can you handle it?" They could handle it. Priscilla spent sleepless nights on the project, combining Victorian luxury with modern technology. Each room was given its own character, each interior detail telling a story. The opening of the hotel was attended by the whole color of society. Olivia Montgomery, who by then had become a close friend of Priscilla, shone in an evening gown. Stunning, darling. Just terrific. The success of Azure attracted attention. Orders came pouring in: reconstruction of old mansions, decoration of restaurants, design of private residences. The studio urgently needed new employees. "We need a system," Raven declared one morning. "The two of us can't pull all the projects together." They began interviewing. Priscilla personally met with each candidate, trying to find not just professionals, but like-minded people. The team included Gabriela Ramirez, a talented visualizer with experience in Europe, Ethan Frost, a young but promising architect, and Veronica Pierce, a pedantic project manager. "You know what fascinates me?" Raven once said. "You have a way of seeing potential in people. Like that time with Gabriella. Everyone looked at her youth, and you saw talent." The studio's office had to be expanded. They rented a neighboring room, turning it into an additional workspace. Priscilla personally decorated it, creating an atmosphere where creativity was intertwined with efficiency. And then came the news that took their breath away. Architectural Digest magazine announced the nominees for the Innovation in Design Award. The Azure project was shortlisted in 2 categories. "We're going to the ceremony," Olivia declared unabashedly. "I've already made reservations, and I've even found you the perfect dress." The awards night was held in an old-fashioned theater. Priscilla sat clutching Raven's hand as the host opened the envelope. "The winner of the Best Historic Redevelopment category is Thornton and McAllister Studios for their Azure Boutique Hotel project." As she walked up to the stage, Priscilla caught Beatrice Woodward's gaze. She was smiling like a proud big sister. In the audience sat people who had become not just clients or partners, but true friends. "This project," she said into the microphone, "is the result of the work of an amazing team. But above all, it's a story about the importance of believing in yourself and your vision." After the ceremony, they threw an impromptu celebration in the studio. Champagne poured in rivers, everyone hugged and congratulated each other. Gabriella was crying with happiness. Ethan did not let go of the award, and Veronica was already planning how to reorganize the workflow, taking into account the increased flow of orders. "I have a suggestion," Raven announced, raising her glass. "It's time to think about a branch in another city. I have some great contacts in Boston." Priscilla looked around the room. The glowing faces of her colleagues, the walls hung with their projects, the award gleaming in the light of the lamps. Just a year ago, she had stood in an empty room, not knowing what the future would bring. Now, "To hell with Boston," she smiled. "Let's take a swing at New York." The team broke into applause. At that moment, Priscilla realized they really could do anything. The key was to believe in themselves and not be afraid to dream. Late in the evening, when everyone had gone, she stood at the window of her office. The lights of the night city twinkled below, and somewhere out there, in another neighborhood, in his perfect house, sat Wade, the man who thought she was weak and dependent. If he only knew what a gift he'd given her with his betrayal. "To climbing?" Raven held out her glass with the rest of the champagne. "To the team," Priscilla replied. "And here's to dreams that become reality." That evening, the studio emptied earlier than usual. Priscilla had let everyone go after the successful delivery of another project. She sat in her favorite chair by the window, going through the photos of the last year, the opening of the studio, the first clients, awards, team celebrations. So much had changed. Her phone vibrated, a message from Olivia. "Don't forget about the fundraiser tomorrow. I'll introduce you to an interesting person." Priscilla smiled. For the past 3 months, Olivia had been persistent in trying to arrange her personal life. "After a husband like Wade, you need a real man," she declared. The charity event was held at the historic mansion. Olivia, resplendent in an emerald dress, immediately took Priscilla under her arm. "Come, I'll introduce you to Garrett Blackwood. He's an architect, specializing in the restoration of historic buildings. Garrett turned out to be a tall man in his 40s with attentive gray eyes and a slight gray on his temples. He was just talking about his latest project, the restoration of an old manor house. "Priscilla McAllister?" His handshake was firm. "Heard about your work at Azure, a splendid blend of history and modernity." They talked all evening. Garrett proved to be not only professional in his work, but also a great conversationalist with a subtle sense of humor. He talked about traveling, shared stories about challenging projects, and listened carefully to her opinions. "You know," he said toward the end of the evening, "I have an interesting project in the suburbs. Maybe you'll take the time to look at it." The next day, Priscilla recounted the encounter to Raven. "There's something about him that's so real. There's no pretense, no attempt to impress." "Unlike some people," her friend snorted, clearly alluding to Wade. Garrett's project was amazing, an ancient library in need of a complete renovation. They met several times a week, discussing details, arguing about concepts, finding unexpected solutions. Gradually, the work meetings turned into long conversations over a cup of coffee. "You know what I admire about you?" Garrett once said. "Your ability to see beauty in simple things, and your strength." "Strength?" she interjected. "Yes. The way you've handled your divorce, the way you've built a business from scratch, that's impressive." Priscilla reflected. Indeed, she had changed. That insecure woman who let her husband make all the decisions was a thing of the past. Now she knew what she wanted out of life. Their first kiss happened in an old library, among scaffolding and dusty bookshelves. It was natural, as if they had known each other all their lives. "I'm not rushing things," Garrett said then. "You've had a difficult year, and you may not be ready for a new relationship." "You know," she replied, "it was that difficult year that taught me to trust my feelings." In the evenings they walked around the city, talking about architecture, art, life. Garrett told about his divorce 5 years ago, how hard it was to start over. Priscilla shared her fears and hopes. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself," he once remarked. One evening, Priscilla was sorting through old things and came across her diary from her marriage to Wade. Rereading the entries, she marveled. How could she have lived someone else's life for so long? "What's on your mind?" Garrett asked, noticing her mood during dinner. "You know, I suddenly realized this whole ordeal has made me stronger. I finally feel whole. Happy." He took her hand. "You deserve that happiness. It's just that now you know it yourself." The library project was nearing completion. She and Garrett stood in the main hall, admiring the result of their work together. The sun played in the stained glass windows, casting multicolored highlights on the antique wood paneling. "Beautiful," Priscilla said. "So are you," he replied, pulling her to him. At that moment she realized life had indeed given her a second chance, and this time she would live it for real, staying true to herself. That evening she wrote in her new journal, "Sometimes you have to lose everything to find yourself. Thank you, Wade, for helping me realize that, and thank you, Eleanor, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I know now, true strength is not in controlling others, but in staying yourself no matter what." Priscilla learned the news of the bankruptcy of the company where Wade worked from Beatrice. A major financial scandal, accounting fraud, top management layoffs. It all filled the front pages of business publications. "Your ex-husband was the CFO there, right?" Beatrice clarified over lunch. "Yes, for the last 3 years." Priscilla set her fork aside. She didn't feel gloating, more a strange sense of desolation. That same evening, Wade called himself. His voice, normally self-assured, sounded broken. "Priscilla, can we meet? I need to talk to you." They met at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. Wade was gaunt, shadows under his eyes, and his once impeccable suit looked wrinkled. "I made a mistake," he began, not looking her in the eye. With everything. With the inheritance, with the divorce, with trying to hurt your business. Why are you here, Wade? He stammered. I need your help, temporarily, until I find a new job. Maybe you could borrow some money? She finished for him. Or let me come back. You've always been good at understanding me. He tried to smile. No, Wade. I've never understood you. Or rather, I never wanted to understand what you were really like. The familiar anger flashed in his eyes. So now you're too good for me? Have you forgotten who helped you become who you are? You're right, Priscilla replied calmly. You did help me. By your betrayal, by your attempts to break me, you helped me find the real me. I can change, a pleading note appeared in his voice. But I've already changed. She stood up from the table. The next day, Priscilla learned that Wade had been trying to contact some of her clients, offering compromising information about the studio. But no one took him seriously now. A week later, Wade showed up at the studio. He was drunk and aggressive. You have to help me. After all the years I've put up with your stupid hobbies. Security, Priscilla said calmly into the phone receiver. You're going to regret this, he shouted as he was led out of the building. No, she said quietly to the closing door. I don't regret anything anymore. In the evening, Garrett called. I heard what happened. Are you okay? Yeah, she smiled into the receiver. You know, a year ago, a scene like that would have ruined me. Now, all I feel is pity. A month later, Wade sold their former home, well below market value, desperate for money. Priscilla found out about it by chance while driving by. The new owners had already started renovations. Do you want to buy it back? Olivia asked when Priscilla told her about it. You have that opportunity now. Why? Priscilla shook her head. That's a past life. I have my own now. She remembered their first meeting with Wade, the young, ambitious financier who had won her over with his confidence. How she'd strived to live up to his expectations, adjusting to his idea of the right wife, and how he ruined everything with his greed, not realizing that true values are not measured in money. On Saturday, she and Garrett were walking along the waterfront. You know, he said, sometimes the best retribution is just being happy. Priscilla looked out at the water where the setting sun reflected. You're right. The greatest revenge is living life to the fullest while staying true to yourself. And Wade, well, he got exactly what he deserved. And it was the perfect justice, the kind that money couldn't buy or intrigue couldn't get. The justice of life itself. The New York office of Thornton and McAllister was opening in the early spring. Priscilla stood at the panoramic window of a spacious loft in Manhattan, watching the bustle of the big city. Behind her back, Raven was giving final instructions to the designers arranging the furniture. Excited? Garrett approached silently, put his arm around her shoulders. A little, she admitted. This is New York, after all. And it will fall at your feet like everything else, he smiled. The last few months had been filled with preparations for the opening of the new office. Priscilla flew between cities, interviewing, meeting with potential clients. Garrett supported her in everything, often accompanying her on trips under the pretext of exploring architectural heritage. Their relationship developed naturally, without tension or drama. He didn't try to rush things or pressure her, allowing her to set her own pace. Maybe that's why Priscilla felt truly free in a relationship for the first time. You know what I love most about you? Garrett once said. The way you light up when you talk about work. It's like a special light goes on inside. The day the New York office opened, everything went perfectly. Journalists, photographers, potential clients. The space was filled with people and energy. Priscilla gave a welcoming speech, feeling confident in every word. We don't just create interiors, she said. We create spaces where people feel alive. After the official part, a representative of a large hotel chain, approached her. "We have been following your work for a long time. We have a proposal, a chain of boutique hotels all along the East Coast." That evening, she and Garrett sat in a small restaurant in Soho. "To New Horizons?" He raised his glass. "To us," Priscilla replied, feeling a warmth spill inside. Architectural Digest magazine had devoted an extended feature to their studio. "A new word in interior design," read the headline. Priscilla read the article and couldn't hold back a smile. Every project, every decision reflected her true vision. "Remember how scared you were to start your own business?" Raven once asked. "And now we have offices in 2 cities and a line of clients." Her and Garrett's relationship had reached a new level, too. One evening, after a long day of meetings, he took her to the roof of a building he had renovated. "I was thinking," he said, looking out at the sunset, "maybe we should combine not only our hearts but also our professional endeavors. Imagine, architecture and design under one roof." "You're making me a business proposition?" Priscilla smiled. "And not just a business proposition." He pulled out a small velvet box. The ring was simple and elegant, like their relationship, built on mutual respect and understanding. "Yes," she answered. And that yes applied to everything, to living together, to combining businesses, to the new horizons that were opening up before them. That night, lying awake, Priscilla thought about her journey, how the fear of losing everything had led her to finding herself, how betrayal had opened the road to true love, about how a business necessity turned into a true calling. "What are you thinking about?" Garrett asked sleepily. "About how sometimes you have to let go of the past to find the future," she replied, looking out at the lights of the nighttime city. There was so much ahead of her: business development, a wedding, new projects. But most importantly, she finally felt whole. A woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to be herself. And somewhere out there she was sure Eleanor was looking at her and smiling. After all, that was what she had dreamed of for her goddaughter: the freedom to be herself and the strength to follow her own path. On that rainy autumn day, Priscilla parked her new Bentley outside the business center. The luxury car was a gift to herself after opening a New York office. She'd never been crazy about expensive cars, but this one was just right for her: sleek, powerful, confident. As she got out of the car, she noticed someone frozen on the steps of the business center. Wade looked at her as if he'd seen a ghost. His gaze darted between her and the car, and a look of utter disbelief froze on his face. Is this your car?" His voice trembled. "Yes," Priscilla replied calmly, pulling her briefcase from the back seat. "Do you like it?" She remembered how only a year and a half ago he'd taken the keys to her old BMW away from her, certain she couldn't even get around town without it. Now she stood before him, successful, independent, driving a car he himself could never afford. But how? He looked confused, his once immaculate suit seeming wrinkled and his hair noticeably gray. "Been working hard." She slammed the door shut, and the distinctive sound of the expensive car seemed to emphasize the gulf between their current positions. Wade was shuffling from foot to foot at the entrance to the building. As it turned out, he'd tried to get in for an interview, but he wasn't on the list. "I saw the article about your company in Architectural Digest," he said, still casting glances at the Bentley. "And I heard about the New York office." "Yeah, things are going pretty well," she replied simply. "Not bad?" He grinned nervously. "You've built an empire, Priscilla, and I thought you couldn't survive without me. I thought you'd beg to come back. You know the best part, Wade? When you took my car keys from me, thinking you were taking away my freedom, you actually gave me wings." He lowered his eyes. "I was a fool, controlling everything, deciding for you. Now look at us. You parked the Bentley out front and I can't even get to the interview." I heard about the scandal at your company, she said softly. Yeah? He wrinkled his nose. Also heard, I guess, that I got remarried and already divorced. She left when the money problem started. I'm sorry. And it was true. She really was sorry for a man who never realized that the main values in life were not measured in money. And you, I hear you're getting married? To that famous architect? Yes, to Garrett Blackwood, she smiled, thinking of her fiancé. At that moment, the phone rang. The contractors were waiting. I gotta go. She headed toward the front of the building, but stopped. Good luck, Wade. Really. Getting into her car that evening, Priscilla caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. A confident woman behind the wheel of a luxury car. How far she'd come from the scared little girl she'd once been. At home, Garrett was waiting for her. After hearing the story of the encounter, he hugged her. And how do you feel? You know, she smiled, gratitude. If it hadn't been for his greed and control, I never would have found the strength to start over. He wanted to break me, and he made me stronger. Outside the window, the sunset was burning down, coloring the sky with golden hues. There was a new life ahead of her, no looking back at the past, no old fears. And she was ready for it, strong, free, at the wheel of her own destiny. Thornton and McAllister decided to open its main office in a historic building in the center of the city. It was an old columned mansion that Garrett had helped restore, preserving its original beauty. Priscilla worked on the interiors for 3 months, creating a space where classic architecture blended seamlessly with modern design. This won't just be an office, she explained to the team. It's a manifesto of our vision, an embodiment of the company's philosophy. On the eve of the opening, she stayed late into the night, checking every detail. An antique chandelier found at an auction in Europe was installed in the main lobby. Vintage armchairs in the waiting area were juxtaposed with ultra-modern furniture, and the walls were decorated with works by young artists. Aren't you tired of being a perfectionist? Garrett smiled, stopping by to pick her up at home. It's not perfectionism, she shook her head. It's love of what you do. The opening turned into the event of the season. Journalists, photographers, business elite. Everyone wanted to see the new corporate headquarters the whole city was talking about. Olivia, impeccable as always, brought some influential friends from the art world. See that man over there by the fireplace? She whispered to Priscilla. That's the curator of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. He's thrilled with your approach to mixing styles. The evening passed like a blur. Congratulations, compliments, discussion of future projects. Priscilla noticed the admiring glances the guests exchanged as they looked at the interiors. She was particularly pleased that everyone found something different. Some admired the antique furniture, others the modern technological solutions. Miss McAllister, a representative from a major architectural magazine, approached her. We'd like to do a big feature on your company, a success story that inspires. Late that afternoon, when the guests had dispersed, she and Raven sat in her new office. The window overlooked the city at night and champagne sparkled in their glasses. Remember how we used to dream about this in college? Raven asked. It seemed so unattainable. And now we have offices in 2 cities, a team of professionals and a line of clients, Priscilla smiled. And that's just the beginning. The following week, Forbes magazine listed their company as one of the fastest-growing businesses of the year. The interview with Priscilla took up 4 pages, talking not only about business, but also about female leadership and the importance of staying true to yourself. Personal life was also a joy. She and Garrett were planning a small wedding among close friends. He understood her like no one else, supporting her in her decisions, rejoicing in her successes, being there for her in difficult moments. You know what I love most about our job? He said one evening. The way we work together to create spaces where people feel happy. Plans for the future multiplied, opening branches in other cities, launching a line of designer furniture, educational programs for young professionals. Priscilla felt she had finally found her path. "You've changed," Olivia once remarked. "It's like you're glowing from the inside out." "I've just become me," Priscilla replied. In her old journal, she wrote, "Sometimes transformation isn't about becoming someone else. It's about finally allowing yourself to be real." In the evening, standing at the window of her new office, she thought about the path she had traveled, about how the fear of losing everything had led her to finding herself, about how betrayal had opened the way to true love, about how a business necessity had turned into a true calling. There was so much ahead of her: new projects, a wedding, business expansion. But most importantly, she finally felt whole. A woman who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to be herself. And somewhere out there, she was sure Eleanor was looking at her and smiling. After all, that was what she had dreamed of for her goddaughter: the freedom to be herself and the strength to follow her own path. They decided to have the wedding at the old mansion outside of town, the place where Garrett had proposed. The fall day was surprisingly warm, as if nature was blessing their union. The sun's rays played in the leaves of the century-old trees, and the air was filled with the scent of late blossoms. Priscilla stood in front of the mirror in one of the rooms of the mansion. The dress, elegant without being too frumpy, perfectly emphasized her figure. Raven, as maid of honor, was fixing her hair. "Nervous?" her friend asked. "Surprisingly, no," Priscilla smiled. "For the first time in my life, I'm absolutely sure of my decision." The ceremony was a chamber ceremony, only the closest friends and co-workers. Olivia, elegant in a lavender dress, furtively wiped away tears. Beatrice Woodward gladly put aside her journalistic impartiality, allowing herself to be moved. As Garrett recited his vows, his voice trembled. "I promise to be not only a husband but a partner, to support your dreams, to rejoice in your successes, to be there for you in every challenge." After the ceremony, during a celebratory dinner, Raven raised her glass. "To the woman who proved that it's never too late to start life over, to my best friend and business partner." Priscilla looked around at those gathered, the people who had become her true family. Each of them had played a part in her transformation, helping her become the person she was now. The day after the wedding, life didn't slow down. The company continued to grow. A third office opened, on the West Coast. A line of designer furniture created in collaboration with European manufacturers was a resounding success. Their collaboration on projects turned into a true symphony. His architectural vision perfectly complemented her designs. Clients raved about how seamlessly their styles blended. By the end of the year, Forbes magazine named Priscilla one of the most influential women in design. At the awards ceremony, she gave a speech that was later quoted: "Success is not about money or recognition. It's about being true to yourself and your principles." One evening, she and Garrett were sitting on the terrace of their new home discussing future plans. They were talking about setting up a charitable foundation to support young designers and architects. "It's time to pay our debts to fate," Priscilla said, "to help others find their way." "Like Eleanor once helped you?" He smiled. "Yes. You know, I often think of her, about how she believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." In Priscilla's office, among the awards and photographs, stood the same porcelain ballerina, the symbol of her transformation. Next to it was now a photo from the first day of the studio, her and Raven, young, scared, but hopeful. "What's next?" Garrett asked one day. "Everything," she smiled. "Continuing to grow, to create, to dream. I know now, nothing is impossible if you believe in yourself." In her journal, she wrote, "Life is an amazing thing. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find the most important thing, yourself. And when that happens, you realize that all the trials were not in vain. They made you stronger, wiser, happier. I know now that it's not about what you have, it's about who you are. And I finally know exactly who I am. There were many plans ahead, new projects, a charitable foundation, maybe even children. But most importantly, she was no longer afraid of the future, because she knew that no matter what happened, she could handle it. After all, she had a loving husband, loyal friends, and, most importantly, self-confidence, which no one could take away. And the little ballerina on her table continued to dance her eternal dance, reminding her that sometimes you just need to spread your wings and let yourself fly.